I 30s, female, had a group of friends, 30s M, male 30s, female 30s, that I hung out with and saw nearly every other day in a major metropolitan city. We got along great, and I thought they were my best friends. One of them I had known for the past 10 years and lived with for 1 year, and we've had virtually no issues. We traveled for a vacation this summer together with a few other people. The day before we left, I had to go to the emergency room for major abdominal pain. It turned out to be something non-emergency related, so I got antibiotics and planned to still go on the trip. Separately, I suffer from PMDD. Shout out ARS PMDD, a very severe and debilitating mental illness. For the most part, I used to be able to have my mental illness in check, but I think the antibiotics somehow counteracted with my meds and stopped working. I started feeling horrible mentally on the trip, depressed, hopeless, could cry at any second. At this time, I feel like my friends on the trip just weren't really talking to me. The three of them would always be in a group together whispering, but never tell me what they were talking about. If I tried to enter their conversations, they wouldn't really pay attention to me or would even just leave. This combined with my mentally ill brain made me think the worst. They're mad at me, they hate me, something is wrong, they don't like me anymore. On the last night of the trip, I couldn't help myself, but was feeling terrible, so I blew up at them and said how they made me feel ignored. They immediately denied it, said they have no idea what I'm talking about, it's a two-way street, etc. I got frustrated and went to take a shower to try to calm down. Then, two of them come into the room to try to talk to me again. But they immediately ganged up on me. They said things like, "The three of us are best friends. This is how we are and how we've always acted. You need to get used to it. You are really quiet, so we don't feel like we have to talk to you. You want me to include you every time we hang out? Ugh, no way." They threatened to not be friends with me anymore, screamed at me while I sobbed, and just repeated, I'm sorry. One guy even said, "Yeah, I actually was ignoring you at one point, but you were being annoying about a particular subject, so I blew you off." I also found this dynamic to be really unfair because it was 2 against 1. I was still naked in a towel from my shower and was in a foreign country and couldn't go home. It felt very vulnerable and awful. After a few of these insults, they finally said, "Well, we're all extroverts and we talk a lot, so maybe we'll just quiet down so you can talk sometimes. There, do you feel better now?" I've never been called quiet in my life before, and don't feel that way with other friend groups. None of this logic made sense to me, so I told them I didn't feel better. This made them frustrated and angry. They started yelling even harder about how I'm not even trying to feel better, and they actually flat out refuse to include me when they hang out. This honestly shattered my entire world. I thought the 4 of us were best friends. We hung out multiple times a week, always texted, chatted, etc., went to the gym together, etc. It didn't occur to me that they just considered themselves to be best friends and me to be outside of that. I had known one of the guys for almost 10 years, and I couldn't believe that him and the girl were just screaming at me while I sobbed hysterically, said, I'm sorry, over and over again. I really feel like they just ambushed me, and the mean way the girl spoke to me, in particular, made me feel verbally abused. When we all got home, maybe a day or 2 later, I asked them all to meet up with me. I apologized and completely took the blame. I was really ashamed of being so emotional due to my mental illness and really thought that since I had such a big reaction, that the situation was my fault and they were just being defensive since I was inconsolable. I told them about my mental illness, how depressed and awful it makes me feel, and I took responsibility for how I acted. They kind of reciprocated, but I felt like they still thought I was crazy and kind of gave me a, sorry you felt that way, instead of a, hey, sorry, it seems like we actually really hurt your feelings. But they did say that they would try to make me feel more included. They also made me promise to respect the fact that they have their own relationships amongst each other. Honestly, I really wanted them to admit that they came down on me pretty hard for bringing up my feelings. But at that time, I just wanted to keep the peace and was fine with that outcome. That same weekend, no one texted me to hang out. We always hung out every weekend, and I thought it was weird that the one time we have tension, they didn't reach out to me. So I looked at their locations, and it showed they were all out at the bars hanging out. Again, this hurt a ton, so I reached out to each friend individually, met up with them in person, and apologized again. Made sure that they were okay and had nothing left to say on their minds. Everything seemed to be fine again. The next week, 2 of the friends delete me off our location app, and they are all suddenly on another trip together that I didn't know about. This, again, punched me to my core. I took the location app to be a sign that they are definitely planning on hanging out without me, and they want to hide it. So I can't call them out. But I thought to myself, these are my friends. They would never do anything like this. There must be an explanation. I asked the guy who I've known for nearly 10 years if he had deleted me, and he said he did delete me because he doesn't want any more drama. Again, punch to the gut. Me bringing up my feelings and talking about my mental illness being chalked up to drama was really hurtful. On top of this, since the initial trip, the 3 basically stopped texting me individually in our usually pretty active group chat, Instagrams, TikToks, etc. I felt the silence was really loud and started to think that this group is icing me out. Once I learned that 2 of them deleted me off the location app and all 3 were on a trip together, I decided that I would move back to my hometown. My mental illness got even worse. My housing situation in the original city was shaky, I lost my job, and went home to my parents. I also stopped trying to communicate with these friends. For my own sanity, I unfollowed them on Instagram, thinking they wouldn't notice since they stopped interacting with me on it. This all happened in the summer. It's been about 4 to 5 months since. Now, one of the friends has come to me and said, "Why are you so mad? Why did you leave? Why did you unfollow?" etc. We talked on the phone for an hour, and I basically recapped the above, saying that my feelings were really hurt. I didn't feel like their apology made up for their hurtful words and actions, and deleting me off the location app and going on a trip together 1 week after telling me they would include me just felt so wrong to me. He basically invalidated my entire experience. Again, said that deleting someone off of a location app like Find My Friends isn't a big deal, but me unfollowing them on Insta is, and they have no idea why I left or why I'm hurt. He also doesn't understand why I didn't make more of an effort to tell the 2 others who ambushed me that they hurt me, but I don't want to do that because they were so mean to me the first time I told them they hurt my feelings. I'm much more protective of myself, my mental state, and who I hang out with now. If I had another instance with that friend group where I had a mental health episode and they got mad at me for it, I would surely end up hurting myself or in a psych ward. I figured that I didn't want to be around these people for my own health. I tried to make it clear that deleting me and going on a trip together made me feel even more excluded and was kind of the final straw in me deciding to leave the city. But he was insistent that I was deleted, so I don't hurt my own feelings when I see them hanging out without me. i.e., they did it with my feelings in mind. So it wasn't hurtful. I asked why they didn't just talk to me about deleting beforehand, but then he just got defensive again. We ended the call in an awkward silence, basically. I said, I could be interested in rebuilding our friendship, but I've lost a lot of trust, and it's going to be hard. I feel like I've gone crazy. This situation hurt so much in the summer and still hurts a ton now, but they can't take any accountability. I tried to separate myself from the situation for my own sanity, but now they are saying that I left for no reason, and no one was icing me out, and everyone was including me. I'm not perfect either. I told some mutual friends in confidence some nasty words that did get back to the 3 of them, and for that, I apologized again. I said I was just really hurt by their actions and didn't help that I was waist deep in very severe mental health issues. After reflecting a lot over the past few months, I figured that their version and my version of inclusion wasn't the same, so they were just going to keep hurting me, even if they truly didn't intend to. We've talked about this issue many times now and never see eye to eye. It seems like they weren't supportive when I got out of the hospital. They weren't supportive when I told them about my mental illness. I figured that maybe we just weren't cut out to be friends. But now they are all coming back and saying they did nothing wrong and I left in a hurry for nothing? Are these friends worth reconciling with? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. So weirdly enough, I went through a similar thing without mental illness. I was in a foreign country with friends and actively got iced out. Then I blew up after it going on for days, and that was basically the end of it. I never saw them again, and I'm really glad I haven't run into them again, because they're terrible people. Do yourself a favor and take the opportunity to start anew. You'll be in a better place for it. Comment 2. No, they're not worth reconciling with, and it honestly doesn't sound like that's their intention. When this dude reached out, nothing he's saying sounds like he even wants to reconcile. Sounds like he's trying to either continue a fight or maybe mutual friends called them out on how they acted, so he's trying to gaslight you for damage control. Either way, no, don't be their friend. They're really weird. Now for the update. Hey everyone, it's been 2 weeks since my last update, and let me tell you, things have taken some turns I never saw coming. Remember how I mentioned that one of the guys, let's call him Mark, had been my friend for nearly a decade? Well, turns out Mark had been harboring feelings for me for years. I only found this out because after I moved back to my hometown, he started sending me these long, emotional texts. He confessed that he had been in love with me since we lived together, and the reason he'd been acting so distant was because he was hurt seeing me with other guys. I was floored. I had no idea he felt this way, and it made me rethink every interaction we'd ever had. But here's the heartbreak. Despite his feelings, Mark still sided with the others during that awful confrontation. He admitted that he was the one who suggested deleting me from the location app because it was too painful for him to see me living my life without him. I couldn't believe it. The guy who I thought knew me better than anyone else was willing to throw away our friendship because of his own unspoken feelings. Meanwhile, the girl in the group, let's call her Sarah, had been dealing with her own issues. I learned from a mutual friend that Sarah had been going through a messy breakup at the time of our trip, which might explain why she was so quick to lash out at me. But that didn't excuse her behavior. She had always been the type to keep her personal life private, so none of us had any idea what she was going through. It was like a puzzle piece clicking into place, but it didn't make the picture any prettier. The other guy, let's call him Alex, had always been the peacemaker of the group. But after everything that happened, he seemed to have taken a step back. He was the one who reached out to me, trying to understand why I left. But even he couldn't see the full picture. He didn't understand that their actions had consequences and that my mental health had to come first. The trip they took without me was apparently a last-minute decision, a way to clear the air after our blow-up. But not inviting me only drove the wedge deeper. It was like they were trying to erase me from the group, and it hurt more than I can say. Since coming back home, I've been focusing on my mental health and trying to rebuild my life. I got a new job, which has been a great distraction, and I've been reconnecting with old friends who have been incredibly supportive. It's been a breath of fresh air compared to the suffocating atmosphere I left behind. But the drama with my old friends hasn't stopped. Sarah reached out to me recently, trying to mend fences, but it ended in another argument. She still couldn't see how her words had cut me so deeply, and I couldn't get past the feeling of betrayal. It was a painful reminder of why I had to leave in the first place. Mark has been trying to keep in contact, but I've been keeping him at arm's length. It's too complicated, and I'm not sure I can ever trust him again after everything that's happened. The fact that he kept his feelings secret for so long and then acted out of jealousy just doesn't sit right with me. As for Alex, we've had a few more conversations, but they always circle back to the same misunderstandings. He thinks I overreacted by moving away and cutting them off, but he doesn't get that it was a matter of self-preservation. So to answer the question I posed last time, are these friends worth reconciling with? Right now, I'm leaning towards no. The trust is broken, and the hurt runs too deep. Maybe with time, we can find some common ground. But for now, I need to put myself first. My husband hates women, and I think he's on the spectrum. I tried to talk about it, and he did something that made me realize he's a hypocrite. Hi guys, this will be long, but I seriously need some advice and perspective. A preface. Other than intimacy, our relationship is pretty good. Not great, we both have issues we are working on in our individual therapies, but we're getting there. I love my husband to bits, and I cannot imagine finding someone I can relate to and respect more. I'd never cheat, he's my favorite person in the world, and I believe he feels the same. We have 2 boys, 3 and 1.5. The older one is autistic, high-functioning but with pathological demand avoidance, and the younger one is just spirited. Very, very spirited. They are both complete maniacs. Now to the problem at hand. We both have baggage. My husband has some anger towards women in general, had a very hurtful mother, severe anxiety issues, and is possibly autistic with PDA. As for me, my parents gave me some disastrous beliefs about relationships and intimacy. In our relationship, it mostly translates to me not recognizing abuse, having trouble setting boundaries, and also seeing intimacy as a win-lose situation, where usually I'm the one losing something. Our intimacy was never great. When we first met 8 years ago, intimacy was almost never enjoyable for me. I never had orgasms and had trouble getting aroused. I had very little experience back then, only one short relationship, terrible intimacy, and a few incidental encounters that ranged from bad to downright traumatic. I could only get off solo. That being said, between the 2 of us, I'm the more adventurous one. My husband is a definition of vanilla and also had some very judgmental beliefs about intimacy. Masturbation, bad, playful domination, degrading, reactive desire, feministic nonsense. It's not a religious thing, as we're both atheists. My husband was mostly content with the way our intimacy life was, with the exception of frequency. For me, it was boring and unsatisfying. At that time, intimacy for me was just a chore, often a painful one due to the lack of arousal. He always took rejection badly too, so I rarely said no when I wasn't in the mood. Couldn't tell him directly that I was not aroused enough. And by bad, I don't mean in a nasty way. He was mostly just very insecure. One "I'm tired, honey, not today" could lead to him not initiating and not being in the mood when I tried for months. Eventually, I shyly started to try to have some intimacy talks with my husband to maybe improve our intimacy life. It honestly was a disaster each time. He took everything I said incredibly personally. He judged me for proposing self-intimacy in his presence and having fantasies. To his credit, most of these silly notions he outgrew with time and some education on my part. But fighting through his resistance was like plowing through ice. I think it was about 2 or 3 years into our relationship when, mostly out of frustration, I confessed to him that I didn't have orgasms during intimacy. And oh boy, was it W2, despite me being as delicate and loving as I could be about it. Just so you'd have some idea, 5 years later, he's still not over it. He proclaimed that something was seriously wrong with me because I didn't have orgasms from PIV with almost no foreplay. By this point, I knew there was no rational discussion with him. If you haven't figured it out by now, my intellectually gifted husband has very little knowledge about how female physiology works when it comes to intimacy, and he reacts defensively when I try to educate him. It's rooted in his anxiety. When I bring up a problem, no matter how gentle I am, and believe me, by now I'm a neurosurgeon, all he hears is she thinks I'm lacking and goes straight to she's gonna dump me. And from that, he needs 5 seconds to spiral through 5 stages of grief and get stuck at the anger one. I found an intimacy therapist. She wasn't great, but we stuck with her for a few months and things somehow improved. She instructed us to not always have penetrative intimacy and sometimes only make it about me. Never happened. But to be fair, the fault was on both sides. If I didn't get off, I was supposed to self-intimacy next to my husband after intimacy, or he could help. While being terribly awkward at first, it helped, and I even managed to orgasm a few times during PIV while stimulating myself. But I could feel my husband wasn't enthusiastic about both things. The clit one kept getting in the way, and masturbation was just awkward. Still, it was the best intimacy I ever had in my life, and our frequency improved slightly. During this time, I also discovered that I do, in fact, possess a libido. It was just absolutely eviscerated by hormonal contraception and the history of bad intimacy. Then I fell pregnant, and my husband completely lost interest in intimacy, which was a shame because my intimacy drive was through the roof. After my oldest was born, we didn't have intimacy for half a year. Our son was a very high-need baby. I got postpartum insomnia, and we were both so exhausted that neither had the mind for it. Then, the next time we had intimacy, I got pregnant again and went into a panic. I was barely above water with our oldest and couldn't imagine adding another baby to the mix. I was also angry at my husband and myself, as he kind of talked me into having unprotected intimacy during my fertility window. We had intimacy so rarely that I didn't push back too much, and also was in the mood. Again, my husband was very reluctant about having intimacy during pregnancy, and this time, I have next to no libido. After our second was born, we didn't have intimacy for a year. My partner wasn't initiating, but was nevertheless resentful. It was me who initiated eventually, but I had to kind of push him into it. It was fun, though I had to do most of the work. Since then, we only had intimacy a few times, and each one was worse than the other. It just gradually regressed to how it was before. Almost no foreplay, and once he was done, he just went away to wash. He'd probably have no problem with staying with me, but it felt pathetic and vulnerable to ask for it. I have trouble getting out of the mindset of, if he wanted, I wouldn't have to remind him. I asked him about it eventually, and he said he didn't think I wanted to get off. Honestly, having to tiptoe around every potentially unpleasant topic to avoid him getting into his defensive short circuit is exhausting. He treats every tiniest complaint as a personal attack of a nuclear proportion. That's why I suspect PDA. He's been in therapy and on meds for about 2 months now, and I can already see a giant change. I can actually allow myself to be cranky sometimes, and he doesn't react with panic when I say I need more help with the kids. I'm very hopeful, but I have no illusions that things will improve by themselves. I know that what I wrote sounds terrible, but in reality, it's not that bad. Other than this defensiveness, my husband is a wonderful, supportive partner and a wonderful father to our kids. I can't imagine my life without him. Even if our intimacy life were not to improve, I'd be fine with that. But he's growing resentful, so the change is needed. Do you guys have any suggestions, opinions? How to talk about intimacy with someone who's extremely insecure and judgmental at the same time? Well, judgmental is not the best word. Big-headed is a more fitting one. He agreed to read something, not Reddit. Reddit is apparently not real advice, if I find him one. Can you guys recommend any good educational books on intimacy? It is important for the book to be gentle with the male ego, as we definitely have an ego problem here. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This post has me so frustrated. You are an amazing writer. I can tell you are funny, you are honest. You try and you work to make allowances that must come from a point of compassion for your husband's trash behavior. You don't need to eat a shoot sandwich the rest of your life just because it has a few tolerable ingredients. Baby, there's still shoot in there. The world is chaos enough already. Find peace from your own beautiful energy and get out of that miserable marriage. Partnership isn't dragging around a 2-ton goalpost for someone else so they can actively resist your needs. Comment 2. I'm not sure how you wrote all of this and concluded that your husband is a good partner. Imagine thinking that someone who is angry and coercive about intimacy that seems to range from bad to hurtful is good. If your husband is smart, he knows about the internet and could improve, but he does not want to. Would you want your daughter treated like this? Would you want your son treating a woman like this? How are you happily married to someone you describe as sexist and misogynistic? Please read what you wrote and really think about if you're focusing on the right problem. Now for the update. Hey everyone, it's been 3 months since my last post, and boy, do I have an update for you. Buckle up, because things have taken some hectic turns. First off, let's talk about the elephant in the room, our intimacy life. Remember how I mentioned my husband's defensiveness and how it was like navigating a minefield? Well, it turns out that was just the tip of the iceberg. After my last post, I decided to take a more direct approach. I sat him down for a serious talk about our intimacy issues, armed with all the patience and understanding I could muster. I thought we were making progress, but then I discovered something that made my blood boil. One day, I was using his laptop with his permission when I stumbled upon a hidden folder. It was filled with, let's just say, materials that were the polar opposite of the vanilla he always claimed to prefer. I was floored. Not only was he indulging in the very things he judged me for suggesting, but he was also hiding it from me. The hypocrisy of it all was staggering. Confronting him about it was a disaster. He exploded, accusing me of snooping and invading his privacy. I tried to explain how I found it accidentally and that the content wasn't the issue, it was the secrecy and judgment. But he wouldn't have it. He stormed out and didn't speak to me for days. In the midst of this, our kids were being their usual energetic selves. My older son's PDA was in full swing, and my younger one was testing every boundary possible. I was juggling their needs, the household, and the emotional turmoil of my marriage. It was like trying to keep a dozen plates spinning at once. Now, let's rewind a bit to give you some context about my husband's past. His mother was not just hurtful. She was a master manipulator who played mind games with him throughout his childhood. This left him with deep-seated trust issues and a skewed perception of women. I always knew this, but I didn't realize how much it was affecting our relationship until now. Back to the present. After the blow-up over the hidden folder, things went from bad to worse. My husband started retreating into himself, barely interacting with me or the kids. It was like living with a ghost. I was at my wit's end, trying to reach out to him, but he was like a fortress with the drawbridge up. Then, out of the blue, he came to me with an apology. He admitted that he had been unfair and that his behavior was a result of his unresolved issues with his mother. He promised to work on it in therapy, and for a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. But that hope was short-lived. Just when I thought we might be on the path to recovery, I caught him in another lie. He had told me he was going to a therapy session, but a call from his therapist looking for him revealed he hadn't been attending for weeks. When I confronted him, he broke down and confessed that he felt overwhelmed and didn't know how to deal with everything. I was torn between anger and sympathy. Here was the man I loved, so broken and lost, yet still causing so much pain with his actions. It was a bitter pill to swallow. In the midst of all this, I had a revelation about my own issues. My parents' toxic beliefs about relationships had left me with a warped sense of normalcy. I realized that I had been enabling my husband's behavior by not setting firm boundaries. It was a tough realization, but it gave me the clarity I needed to start making changes. I began by insisting on complete transparency in our relationship. No more hidden folders, no more lies about therapy. If we were going to fix this, it had to be built on honesty. I also started setting boundaries for myself, refusing to accept behavior that made me feel disrespected or unvalued. As for the intimacy therapist, we stopped seeing her. It became clear that we needed to address the deeper issues in our marriage before we could even think about improving our intimacy life. Now, here we are, 3 months later. Things are still rocky, but there's a sense of cautious progress. My husband has resumed therapy, this time with a new therapist who specializes in childhood trauma. He's starting to open up about his past, and I can see the effort he's making. As for me, I'm learning to stand up for myself and not accept less than I deserve. It's a slow and painful process, but I'm committed to it, for my sake and for our kids. BF agrees our home is mine too, but when I get COVID, he refuses me and goes on trip with his family, so I remove my wife privileges until we actually get married. Now he expresses doubts. I find suspicious texts. Hello everyone, I, 23 years old female, have been living with my boyfriend, 25-year-old male, for the last 2 years in his apartment. He pays the bills and I pay for all the food expenses, no rent or mortgage issues. I asked to help with the bills also, but he said no because he makes 3 times my salary and he would feel bad if I contributed more. I asked about our situation, if we just live together because he likes company, or if we are looking to get married in the future and I should consider his home mine as well, and he agreed with the second part. Hence, I started doing all the housework. He hates it, but helps sometimes when I make snarky comments about me being a maid. And just taking care of him, since I am a person that shows affection in my own way. For example, he made a comment about his wardrobe being a mess because he couldn't find anything and would fix it tomorrow. So the next day he went to work and I fixed it for him. He said he wanted some action figures he saw and would buy them with his next paycheck. So I bought them for him as a surprise, etc. He does the same, but to a lesser extent, which I don't mind. He knows me, my secrets, and has helped me a lot emotionally and physically. For example, he surprised me with my own gaming station so we can game together, etc. So I just started to feel at home. I come from a broken family, and it was really difficult for me to feel this way. His parents adore me and invite me over for lunch and more. So I gradually brought all my stuff to our place. Hence all my clothes, work stuff, I work from home, and things are there. For New Year's Eve, I went to visit my family and took a infection 19 test at their home, since my aunt that lives downstairs has a newborn and some vulnerable members. And unfortunately, I tested positive, no symptoms, and locked myself in my previous room. I immediately called him and told him that I would like to return to our home, and he said no because he doesn't want to get sick. I felt kind of icky about this statement and sad because when he tested positive and I tested negative, I stayed with him to keep him company and take care of him. For some reason, I didn't get sick, and he didn't want to do the same. He said he would test too, and if he was positive, I could come back, or else he would bring me some stuff until I am tested negative and can return. Today I called him in the morning because I literally have nothing here. I wanted to take a shower and do some work preparation for tomorrow. He would bring my work laptop as well, as I am expected to work tomorrow. He told me he had tested negative, and he went with his family for the holidays on a one-day trip and would bring my stuff another day. I was hella pissed and told him that he shouldn't do that, or if he wanted, he could just bring my stuff and then go. I told him to go get it myself, but he didn't want to in case I infected the place. Understandable. And he called me selfish and a jerk because I quote, "I put myself on the front once, and now this happened. It's not my fault you brought all your stuff to my place and didn't have some spare at your parental home." I told him that we had discussed this, and he had told me that his home is mine as well. So what happened now? He brushed it off and continued saying it's my fault that I didn't leave stuff at my parental home. Lately, I have started to see some manipulation from his part. He knows some words trigger me and uses them to upset me. When I make a comment about the fact that he doesn't help me with housework, he states he does all my favors, and I still complain. For example, I asked to go to a zoo and he took me the next day and stuff like that. And when I try to communicate my feelings, he brushes me off and states he is tired from work and can't hear me always complaining too, even if I haven't complained for days, and stuff like that. I discussed with him the marriage factor, and he stated he doesn't want to get married in a church and doesn't see the point of marrying because it's just a certificate, and what matters is the feelings, not the paperwork. I have stated that I want my first child before my 30s, and we agreed on that. But now he wants me to wait longer than that, and stuff like that. So naturally, after today's incident, in my point of view, he put his fun over my basic needs and didn't care that I didn't have a damn underwear to take a bath. And since he assumed his place is his and not ours as we stated, I want to try and remove the wife privileges from his life. He will cook for himself, wash his own clothes, tidy his own place, and stuff so I can see how he is going to react. Maybe I just got pissed because I always put him first, and he didn't when I needed it. I don't know if I am overreacting and making a big fuss over nothing as he stated. So should I remove my wife privileges? TLDR, my boyfriend stated his home is mine as well. I tested positive for infection 19, and he told me to stay at my parental home so he doesn't get sick, and he would bring some of my stuff. In the end, he decided to go on a trip with his family and bring me my stuff when it is convenient for him, and now I am pissed and want to remove my wife privileges until we actually get married. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Break up with him. He doesn't want to get married, and you do. There is no compromise here. Marriage is like children. You either want it or you don't. I wouldn't stay with him hoping he's going to propose because he won't. And if he does, he's going to be resentful. Comment 2. You're saying you want to take the wife privileges away until you get married, but what happens after you get married? Do you think he's magically just going to treat you better all of a sudden? Now, for the update. Hello, everyone. A lot has happened since my last post, and I'm still reeling from the events of the past 3 days. After the whole New Year's Eve debacle, things between my boyfriend and me took a turn for the worse. I was still stuck at my family's place, feeling abandoned and without my essentials. He finally brought my stuff over, but the way he did it was so cold and impersonal. He just dropped the bags at the door, didn't even come in to see how I was doing. It was like he was avoiding me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. We've been through so much together, like when he supported me through my anxiety attacks, and when I was there for him during his job loss last year. We've always bounced back from our arguments, but this time it felt different. It felt like he was pulling away. When I finally tested negative and returned to our apartment, the atmosphere was tense. I decided to follow through with my plan to stop doing all the housework. I wanted to see if he would step up, or at least show some appreciation for what I do. But instead of stepping up, he just let the place become a mess. Dishes piled up, laundry went unwashed, and he didn't even seem to notice. I confronted him about it, and that's when he dropped a bombshell. He said he was feeling overwhelmed with the relationship and needed space. He admitted that he had been feeling this way for a while, but didn't know how to tell me. I was shocked. All this time, I thought we were on the same page about our future, but it turns out he was having doubts. The unresolved conflict between us grew as we tried to navigate this new dynamic. He started coming home late from work, and I noticed he was texting someone frequently. I didn't want to be that girlfriend who snoops, but my curiosity got the better of me. One night, when he was in the shower, I glanced at his phone. There was a string of texts from a coworker, and they were definitely not just about work. My heart sank. I felt betrayed. I confronted him about the texts, and he got defensive. He said they were just friends, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. We had a huge fight, and he accused me of not trusting him. But how could I, after everything that had happened? The next day, I was a mess. I couldn't focus on my work, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I remembered how he had been there for me when I was dealing with my family issues, how he had comforted me when I felt like I had no one else. But now, it was like he was a different person. I decided to take a walk to clear my head, and that's when I saw them. My boyfriend and his coworker, laughing together at a cafe. It was like a punch to the gut. I felt so foolish for thinking we had something special. When I got back to the apartment, I packed a bag with some essentials and left. I needed to get away and think about what I wanted. I went to stay with a friend who had always been there for me, even when my boyfriend and I were in our little bubble. Now, I'm at a crossroads. I don't know if I should try to work things out with him or if I should move on. He's been calling and texting, saying he's sorry and that he wants to talk, but I don't know if I can trust him again. It's like our whole relationship was built on a foundation of lies. I'm trying to figure out what to do next, but it's hard. I keep thinking about the good times we had, but then I remember how easily he lied to me. It's a constant battle in my head, and I'm not sure which side will win. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.